Welcome, everybody, to the American Space Museum. I'm Marquette. We're so glad you're with us today to stay curious. This is the 51st anniversary of the launch of America's first space station, the Apollo Orbiting Workshop, it was called. And we've got Gary Allgire here with us, structural engineer for the Apollo and Shuttle program. Gary, welcome again.
Oh, thank you. Glad to be back.
Gary's a frequent visitor, and go to Gary Allgire there on our YouTube channel, and you're going to see some fabulous programs that Gary's done with us. And I'm opening up my smart tablet here so we can answer your questions with Marty Winkle at the command of our Streamlabs program there. We've threw together a few slides. Gary's an excellent docent here and was given a docent tour, and he obliged me to sit down and talk a little bit about what he knows about the um, Skylab launch that kind of went awry. We had some problems just a minute after the launch there that some of you space lovers do know about, and others of you are going to learn about. So, Gary, we're gonna talk a little in general terms about Skylab. 51 years ago surely went by quick in a
Oh,
way,
yes,
didn't
they
it?
have. They sure
In
have.
there. Let me put the American Space Museum. What overview do you have of the mission that launched at about 1:30 in the afternoon? I think it was a Monday even. Kind of the stories I read, it's pretty hot and but what do you recall about it? And what were you doing at that time?
Well, I was working on the three spacecraft that would be following up Skylab 1, 2, and 3, as I call it. Uh, that we'll talk about a little bit later. But
Yes, the numbering system
yeah,
of Skylab is engineers had their own numbers, but the people that worked on the spacecraft and the media had another set
that's
of
the
numbers.
numbers.
We're going
But
to talk about that at the end.
but I worked in the office, and then we had a gentleman by the name of John Link who was actually worked the Skylab itself. I don't know if most people know this, but there's actually two Skylabs that were manufactured.
Really?
Yes, there's the one we launched, and we had a backup one, but that one backup ended up being at the Smithsonian Air Space Museum in Washington D.C., and it is completely stocked up with what the actually was going to launch it. It has all the clothing, the food, all the instrument experiments they were going to do. It's all there inside that. It's ready to launch.
Wow. And why didn't we launch it after the
I don't
first
know
one?
why we didn't launch it. They just decided not to. I don't know if because we didn't have really any more Saturn V first stages left.
That was the last Saturn V.
Yes,
Well,
yeah.
yeah, but we got it had 18 and that's laying out there at Kennedy Space Center and
No, you don't.
wasn't.
You,
Oh, that's part of it. Yeah.
we had spare leftover. We still had second and third stage flight units in the VAB when they canceled the program.
Uh-huh.
We didn't have any more Saturn first stages. So the one that you see on our display here at the Saturn V display, the first stage is the flight verification vehicle, which was the first thing that came here back in the, actually it was here during the Gemini launches. And it's a flight verification vehicle. It's not real, but the second and third stage are flight articles that were to be flown for
Hmm.
18 and 19.
Well, we have some people commenting already. Thank you for commenting about that. The hardware of the leftovers of Apollo and Skylab. We're going to talk about one of the leftover command modules that had an interesting role to play in this Skylab saga. Played out 51 years ago. We've been going through the three missions all year. We're going to see a DVD here in a minute. But we've got, Marty, you're writing down some notes there. Go ahead and read off what you want to read off there.
Well, I just have names.
Oh, okay. Well, C.B. Spock said a really good book on Skylab is Homesteading Space.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds like a Cooper book, but not sure who wrote that. Sean plays too much. Hi from Atlanta. Just call me Sean, one of our new viewers. Nice to see Mark and Gary today. Thank you, Sean, and spread the word. Tom Celentano up there in Hartford, Connecticut, said he remembers that launch day well. My parents let me stay home from school to watch.
Oh, great.
So, Gary Gerald, a good afternoon from Collins, Georgia there.
Okay.
Dave Stange says he loved Skylab, was in high school, and our teacher brought a television in so we could watch the last Saturn V launch. Now, those are the memories that we all remember.
Okay.
The school days, dragging in the TV for usually a manned mission of some sort. Tommy Usiak is saying hi. This is Tom's photo. He was a college kid when he shot this photo of Marty, would that be sunrise or sunset? You know what angle he's got there? Mark will probably tell us. I believe it's sunset, but there's the Saturn
Yeah, I would
V
say so too.
with the big shroud over the Skylab. Carlton Bailey says hello, and Doug Forrest. There's one more S1C at Michoud, which is part of the Infinity Museum now. Could that have possibly have been used?
I'm not aware of that one, so I really can't comment on that.
I'm aware of that one too, Doug. I've seen it with my own eyes, and they had a fundraiser there to paint it back in the day. So we're gonna learn some cool things half a century ago about Skylab, and we love talking about it. There's a lot of favorite astronauts that were part of it. Only 3 of the 9 are alive, one from each of the 3 crewed missions. Wanted to mention that Wednesday we're efforting a guest, and Thursday we got Terry White, our orbital processing chief. We'll be talking about the shuttle garage and all the pit stop mechanics in there and what things they did on it back in the day. We're going to talk about the breakaway windows. I know that were for safety and to get out of it if it crashed on the runway or something unfortunate like that. And we're also going to get out the NASA acronym book. Not anagram.
Okay.
Acronym book.
Oh, that's a big book.
And kind of have some fun with acronyms with Terry White on Thursday. There's a picture of Gary, and there's another photo of Skylab, our promotion today. Tom Usiak took that May 14th, 1973. And there you are talking with Rusty Schweikert, not a Skylab astronaut, but Apollo 9. And that was when Rusty came. He was a backup, I believe, of Skylab. And so he's involved with this book by Dwight Stephen Bonacki, and his wife, Alexandra, the producer of this, a great documentary, Searching for Skylab. You can buy it, Google it, have the DVD sent to you or download it for a small fee. And this is a definitive documentary of Skylab. There we got Jack to sign it, and Rusty Schweikert, and Dwight there, and Dwight and Alexandria. I need to owe you guys a call, but we're trying to do some things together. They live in Europe, and he's actually from Australia. So what a DVD that is that you need to add to your collection. Well, Skylab, the beautiful artwork of Skylab focused on the sun, because that's what the big windmill was all about.
Yeah.
The windmill is the power solar panels for this incredible solar telescope that was to find out more about our favorite star. And everyone was thinking about our favorite star the last few days as the aurora was.
That's right. Yeah.
From really one humongous sunspot. You go up to Georgia. Did you hear any of your friends see aurora?
Yes, they sent pictures from where we have our place in Georgia, and it's of course it's up in the very north end of Georgia, but they did see the aurora borealis.
I tried to see it down here, but didn't.
No.
It wasn't lucky enough. Robert Law's watching live from Scotland. Thank you, Robert. And CB Spock says Homesteading is a David Hitt book, Homesteading Space, and we'll check that Skylab book out. Robert Law said he watched it on a black and white TV. Not much coverage in the UK at the time. So, but any space geek at the time would find a way to find out about it or get to the library to read up about it weeks later. But America's first space station, because the sun was ironically in a hot mode like it is now at the peak of the 11-year solar cycle. That extra energy from the sun actually heats the Earth's atmosphere. When you heat something, it expands, and the atmosphere was a little bit higher, and the drag of this brought it down a lot earlier before we could get a space shuttle up there. Another long story that we've touched on. But we're going to stick to the Skylab vehicle itself until the very end of our program here. I was showing Gary this. This is a sketch made in August 19th, 1966 by George Mueller. George Mueller was the associate director at Johnson Space Center. He was a master politician going to Congress and getting the money and explaining why we needed the money. And this is his first sketch in 66 of using an Apollo command module. On the right is a rocket that's converted to a orbiting workshop, and then he had a few other details there. He was looking at nuclear power hanging off of it at the bottom there to try to fuel it, I believe, back in the 66 era, which a lot of people were looking at nuclear power as solving our problems. What a gorgeous photograph. I love that photograph.
That's a good photograph, yeah.
Probably taken by an airplane. No drones back
then.
then.
I have a video of that it's been lost, but I used to fly over that pad with the Air Force and look at that.
Did you really?
Yeah.
So that brings back some good memories
in
there.
Helicopters.
A question I had that you answered is why the Saturn V was not considered to be used for larger payloads. And certainly they were thinking of a Hubble telescope and things like that back in this day.
I don't know about the telescope, but there was, there's a lot of studies of what to use it for besides just the Apollo program, but nothing ever came to anything out of that.
Because the big spy satellites were put up by Deltas and mostly Delta rockets and another one I'm thinking of.
Well, the
Delta, a lot of NRO.
But those were, that's way too big for that use for what they were using for.
Okay.
In fact, they were trying to, towards the end of the program, they really wanted to go to smaller satellites.
Uh-huh.
So.
Well, perfect record of launches. What an amazing rocket it was. The Saturn V rocket there, the last time a full-up Saturn V was launched was 51 years ago. And there it is, Tom Usiak, the big brother there, at the press site there. They had overcast skies. He's talked about this story before. And so it quickly disappeared into the clouds. Were you at the launch?
I was there. We didn't notice anything different until after we got the feedback that there was an issue with that launch. And that the meteoroid shield that was on the lab had come loose and came off. And as it came off, it took one of the solar panels off with it. And also the other side that was partially deployed. And so that was what they, eventually that's what got into orbit.
And there's the look at it there once the first crew got up there with Pete Conrad as the commander.
Yeah.
And we've got lots of time to talk about that mission that was launched 11 days later on the 25th of May. And they had a timeline because without that meteor shield, and what was going on in there?
Well, temperatures inside without the shield on there, it was there to protect from meteorites and also for controlling the heat from the sun. And the lab got up to 150 degrees inside during that time frame.
All right.
Now, there was a lot of, between the launches, between Skylab 1 launching and this, we did a lot of studies. I do know for a fact that they didn't quite understand the full configuration. And one of the gentlemen in our office that was in charge of that vehicle flight, he was invited down to the lower part of Brevard County where we had some telescopes that most people didn't know about. And he was invited down, and he actually visually verified that the panel was the solar panel was off and gone.
Wow! So you're saying that a telescope powerful enough here in Brevard County could see the structure on
It
there.
was so powerful they said they could see an astronaut doing a spacewalk.
That's very
Back in the-
interesting down
that
there.
time
Sounds
frame.
like down there Patrick Henry
It was
area
the
there to be.
Valkyrie.
Okay.
It's not there anymore.
Well, there are telescopes now, backyard astronomers that sky watchers that will photograph the International Space Station going over. But I've never seen a photograph of them showing a spacewalk, an astronaut.
Well,
Maybe.
they haven't, but they had the capability back then.
Yeah.
At least that's what I was told.
Well, no, I could believe that if they could track it. Of course, it'd been on film to record anything, but visually. So,
And then
yeah, there's no cameras on this to show you what was going on. Everything was just. That's what I always find, Gary, about 50 years ago and 40 years ago. The missions, there was just everything was so inferred by the data because there wasn't any visual
that's right.
contact.
Yeah. Other than that one, and then this is one I did my famous helicopter ride with the Army in a Huey. I went out and actually looked for the solar panel and the meteorite shield in the ocean.
Did you?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, that was a very exciting trip. But I think I've talked about that before.
Yes, you
but,
did. Yeah, I forgot. Yes.
So, just to move on, but it was an exciting time. We didn't find anything naturally. If it had been this floating, by the time we went out and looked at it, it would probably been up in New York or up in Nova Scotia, someplace because of the currents.
Yeah, well, that's amazing. I wish they had found pieces of it, and you
Yeah.
do too, from an engineering
Yeah.
standpoint, to figure out what happened. But just in so it started out rough with the temperatures that hot inside, and here's a cutaway. What would that do? Why?
Well, they were worried about one is outgassing from some of the materials in there and some of the whatever's stored, and it would be very hazardous for the astronauts to go in there. And so
to
they
even
were-
breathe the air.
breathe the air. So they were concerned about that, and that was their first concern was to go up there. JSC got with some ladies who made this nice big mylar blanket that the astronauts would put over the top of the Skylab once they got up there to it.
I forgot to
that
put
cool-
that slide in
And
there.
they
Sorry.
cooled that down. It's on one of these slides here. You'll see
The
it up
blanket
there.
is, yeah.
The blanket.
I had the
Yeah.
group working on it there, but we'll.
And I did have a little thing showing how it's folded up and how it deployed. But anyway, they stuck it up through the airlock, and it was like an umbrella, and they just popped it open and then put it in place. I think they've replaced it on the next follow-up mission. They put a little bit better one on
They
there.
did. They did. Jack
they-
Lausma actually
yeah.
was involved with that spacewalk. He's talked about it.
Yeah.
But yes, absolutely. And we'll see the last configuration of it
Yeah.
when they left here. But it was a lot of stress and a lot
Well,
of concern because this is a waste of a big resource and
We
a lot
spent
of
a
time.
lot of time talking about it. There was proposals to launch it with actually on one that had fuel. They would use it to run the fuel because they could go in there after the oxygen and hydrogen were gone, and they could actually set up in there. But eventually they got smart and they did it the way we have it here, where they launched it with no fuel inside of the lab itself. Now they did have some difficulty when Pete Conrad got up there to dock with the space with the docking module of this lab. He had quite a few issues trying to dock. He had the same issues that happened on Apollo 14, is he couldn't get a capture,
Mhm.
and so he spent quite a bit of time. In fact, supposedly they removed the docking probe and brought it back into the spacecraft, and they supposedly worked on it. But I do not believe that, because there's no way they could work on that piece of equipment. They didn't have the tools, and if it was extended, if they'd already extended the probe out, they would have had to use one of the 4 GN2 bottles to retract it, because you cannot fold it up to bring it inside the command module if it's extended. And so I question that, but I do know that they did have a problem. It took them 6 attempts to dock it. And he did something a little different. He went up there after he tried to, they tried to deploy the stuck one. I don't know if we're going to get into that, but after they did that, he wanted to rest. So he went and did a soft dock, which, in other words, he went up there and he had the capture latches, capture inside the drogue, but he didn't fire anything to do a hard capture. And he sat there while they ate lunch and rested. So then he came out and they went to go try to do some more work. And he came back. He could not dock then. That's when the latches would not capture. So I think he probably had something out of configuration, and it took him a while to get it straightened out.
Very interesting. You got two spacecraft in orbiting Earth at 17,500 miles an hour, and though it doesn't look like they're moving when you're up close to each other,
Yeah.
there was something going on there that wasn't right. We welcome everybody watching today. Welcome your questions to Gary Allgire. Tommy UCX says that's a sunrise that he photographed there. And Neil 1030 said, remarkable that they came up with a solution in less than 10 days. And it certainly was. Not only was the concern about the heat inside of their outgassing things, but they had a lot of film up there too. This was they had film canisters that were going to be changed out during spacewalks, risking lives to bring the data back in on celluloid film. And so that was a big concern, because then you photographers know you store film in a refrigerator to keep it fresh, so to speak. And then they were worried about the food that they were going to eat and then all that sort of stuff.
But the big concern was getting the solar panel out. If they didn't get the solar panel out, then the mission would be totally scrubbed. There would be no use to even go up there, because they wouldn't have enough power to operate the station.
Skylab's goals were to study the human body, study the sun, and study the earth, pushing the envelope of a crew, 3 men up there on 3 different missions, 28 days, 56 days, and then 84 days was the final tally up there. And each one of those missions broke longevity records at the time for humans orbiting the Earth. There is what they looked at initially when they got up there. All right, the solar telescope deployed correctly, amazingly so, I think, given the damage that you're seeing there. And there it is when they left the station for the last time with the revised
the heat shield
on there. That was and then you see the deployed solar panel there on the right.
Now, they made 2 attempts to deploy that. This first attempt failed, and the second attempt they finally did be able to deploy it. The first attempt is Pete Conrad flew up to the panel that was stuck. They depressurized the cabin. One of the astronauts stood up and he had a hook, and the other astronaut that has free hands, he grabbed around the astronaut's legs so he wouldn't be pulled out. And then they tried to pull the solar panels out. It failed. That's when they went back in and they got inside, put the solar panel, the shield up. Then they had another plan where they went back out, and then they had a strap that they put across that panel. And one of the astronauts got out and did a little bit of a walk and got underneath it with his shoulder and stood up, and that's pulled it out. That's the story that I've heard that they actually did.
Yeah, very daring. Part of that time, Pete Conrad was flung across. By by that opening there. Kind of a dangerous. 1 or 2 things could have gone wrong there. It'd have been a torn spacesuit or a crushed helmet or something like that.
If he got cut loose, what were they going to do? Maybe he's on the cord.
But all the repairs were done standing up out of the command module that was docked to the docking port there.
No, they could not have gotten to that part. They would have had to undock and go back around.
Okay, all right.
To get around to it, because the airlock.
So it was out of the airlock of the Skylab.
They used the airlock to deploy the shield, but they had to go back out to get to the solar panel.
Yeah, the shield was through a little tube.
Well, it was a hatch. Now the device was pretty big. I did have a sketch, but we didn't have a chance to get it in here. It showed what it looked like and how they would put it through there and then deploy it. So
we'll leave that with you. We'll talk about it maybe later in the month here, where we get the Skylab 1 crew up there, or 2. Which name is it there? So very famous picture there, of course, the Skylab coming back, and there is Steve Jokums of the Lake County Spaceport. This is one of his models and the decals that he sells. at the Lake County Spaceport up there in Illinois, and pretty cool looking model, isn't it?
Mhm.
And he's even got a decals that you buy to put on the solar panels, as well as some sort of decal there for the cover that helped that out there. So very cool there. Um, Here's a picture that Tom Usiak had in his group that shows mobile launch platform number 2 that was just dismantled a year or so ago. In fact, our Shuttle Fest 2 centered around the documentary on that.
Okay.
But you understand and are familiar with what's going on there, Gary. What did you tell me about that?
Because it's Skylab, we didn't use the mobile support structure, which was also brought up by the crawler and put there, and that gave us access to all the stages, gave us access to the command module, service module area, also the slaw, so the Grumman people could get into the slaw for the working on the lunar module. And when we went to the pad, we drove down at the very bottom of the base outside, just on the north side. We would walk through a set of doors, go up 2 flights of stairs, or take an elevator, and that would bring us up to the bottom area there that we're underneath the mobile platform. And then the structure you see right there is an elevator, and that would take us up to the top of the mobile launch platform. And from there, we would walk over to the mobile MSS, the mobile support structure, where we would take another elevator and go up to get access to the Apollo spacecraft. Now we could turn right here and go up to the elevator that's in the actual tower itself, and that would bring us up to swing arm 9, where we would cross over there to go in through the white room that way. That was something that we hardly ever did use. We always used the main elevator in the MSS.
Some familiar territory to you, Marty?
Oh yeah.
You've scaled up those elevators and stuff there. Yeah, quite a massive structure when you're up close to it like that. That's why we wanted to throw that picture in. And here's the comparison. Gary, what are we looking at here?
Okay, we're looking at the Skylab Saturn V on pad 39A, and off in the distance is 39B, which had the Skylab 1 vehicle on top of it. It was a Saturn 1B sitting on the milk stool. This was a very easy way for us to match up with the swing arms for the actually the Saturn V stack when we were flying Apollo. This is pad B. Was only used, you know how many times that was ever used in the Apollo program?
No.
5 times. We used Apollo 10 was the only one that actually had a vehicle launch off that went to the moon. And then we had the 3 Skylabs and then Apollo Soyuz test project.
Oh, pad 34.
They're out to 39B.
Or 39B, yeah, 39.
Those were the only ones ever used.
Interesting, until the shuttle era, of course, then, when they used.
Yeah.
Not knowing much about structural engineering, that Saturn on top of the milk stool, I can't imagine the engineering meeting around the table where somebody said, "Hey, why don't we just put it on a big stool?" And I mean, it's hard to understand how that is holding all that weight. That's what I'm trying to say.
I think Buchanan was in charge of design engineering, and I'm sure that was his idea.
Huh.
He was
Buchanan.
Yeah, he was instrumental.
What was his first name?
We just call him Buck.
Okay.
He was very instrumental in designing all that hardware out there, and he had a couple engineers. Now, us engineers that worked on the Apollo spacecraft called those guys. So these guys came out of the shipyards, because their stuff that they built was very heavy and crude compared to delicate stuff that we saw on the Apollo spacecraft.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it was a very ingenious way. Instead of tearing down the whole launch tower and coming up with a new one, this is what they did.
How would you figure out the weight to strength factor there? I mean,
Well, they
that's
had
just
their
some
math
raw
models.
physics, or-
I wasn't involved with it, but I'm sure they did a good job, obviously, because it worked.
Yeah.
I don't know if he got any awards for it, but he had a good team of engineers working for him.
Very interesting there. The milk stool, part of the legend of
Yeah.
of crewed space flights in America. Some people don't know that this was also in the works.
This was a spacecraft. I think it was settled. It was supposed to be used for Apollo 20 or 21. It was laying around, and they decided if the last time we flew a mission to the Skylab, if the command module did not had a problem and they couldn't use it, they did have a backup where they would launch this other spacecraft on a Saturn 1B. And what they would do, instead of having 3 astronauts on board, they would have just the 2, the commander and the lunar module pilot.
And that was going to be Vance Brand and Don Lynn,
Yes.
both rookies at the time. Don Lynn, of course, Vance Brand just had a 91st birthday last week, and he flew, of course, Apollo Soyuz test project in 1975, and then commanded 3 shuttles. Don Lynn waited 22 years, I think, to fly.
Wow.
On one of the early 1985, 84, something like that, space shuttles on there.
Go back to the previous picture here. So what they would do is they would fly 2 up, and since there's 3 astronauts on Skylab, then they would put 1 in the center and 2 underneath. Now there was some concern originally about the vertical struts that holds the couch suspended off the floor. Those struts can extend on landing, and they were worried if that happened that the astronauts sitting below that would be crushed. So they did a study, and they found out actually they never did work that way. They never had to use them, but they were also they had a lockout device on them that the crew, when they re-entered the atmosphere, when they got on after they were on the main chutes, there were some lanyards that were tied to those struts, those 4 vertical struts, and they would pull them, and that would release a lock to hold the inner and outer struts together, and so they were allowed to stroke. The issue was if they stroked far enough, the struts would come apart because they were not interconnected. So, but they never had to do that.
NASA has something figured out for everything.
Yes, they did.
Though, like you said, that may or may not have worked. And that, again, is an interesting point that all of the Apollo command modules, the seats were suspended from the ceiling, so to speak. And not bolted to the what we'd think of the floor.
No, the floor. The original concept was that's where they would sleep under the couches, but it never. I don't think they ever did, and they ended up putting a lot of stowage underneath there for the moon missions, and I guess some Skylabs they had stuff in there for to take into the Skylab itself.
Well, there's Vance Brand and Don Lynn again. Both are still with us. Like I said, Brand's 91 years old. I think Lynn's in his late 80s, obviously, in there. But this hardware that they were practicing a rescue in is out at the Kennedy Visitors Complex at the Saturn V Center.
That's right. That is a real Apollo spacecraft. They used to have
Was that number 119?
Yeah, it could be. They used to have a stand up there where you could walk up and see where the docking system would have been. They had that open, and you could actually look inside. And they took all the couches out and everything inside, so all you saw was the aft bulkhead.
Mm-hmm. Still a neat artifact and a cool thing to see. The real deal out there. Like so many of our museums house now the artifacts of the Apollo, Gemini, and Mercury programs out there. Well, these are the 9 astronauts who spent time on Skylab. Of course, 28 days. The first one, Pete Conrad, was the commander. Joe Kerwin, who is still alive in his late 80s, and Paul Weitz, who passed away. Then the second crew to go up and occupy it was again led by another moonwalker. In fact, Conrad's moonwalking buddy Al Bean was the commander, who later became an artist after this mission. Owen Garriott and Jack Lausma. Of course, Jack is still surviving. He's a leap day baby.
Oh, that's
yeah,
right.
he was born on leap day. He just turned he turned 24 years old.
That'd be nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah, he's
Unfortunately,
88, of course.
he's old,
And
34
then
year
you've got Ed Gibson there in the middle above your head, Jerry Carr,
Yeah.
and uh,
Ed Poe, isn't it? One of them's Poe.
Pogue, yeah,
Pogue?
Bill Pogue, yeah.
Yeah.
Bill Pogue. All rookies was on the last crew.
Yeah.
Bill Pogue and Carr passed away, and Ed Gibson is in
Mm-hmm.
his mid 80s. And Ed's written he's actually written a third fiction book about space heroes. I enjoy them, the first two, pretty good. He's really a good writer, and Ed Gibson is. We'd love to talk about Ed Gibson, about his writing more so than being an astronaut. A lot of interesting things on the Skylab happened, but none more interesting than Jack Lausema taking a shower in space
Yeah.
in there, which he told me personally it was cold. And then Marty, he's been at many of the Grumman events, is the famous Capcom that took the message from Apollo 13, Houston, we've had a problem.
Mm-hmm.
But Jack says that during the 56 days he was up there, his commander, Alan Bean, never took a shower. All right.
Well, he had wipes.
Yes, he had
Yeah,
wipes and
that's not
stuff.
that bad.
But it's really cold, Jack said. He only took 2, he said, up there during the time. But they had to check it out and try it out. Pete Conrad did the first one on that first mission up there. A couple of things I forgot to throw in there, but what do you have to say about the missions in general, or the performance of the the command module, and that's your expertise, was docked, for first 28 days, then 56, and then 84 days, and never rotated around the rotisserie thing to keep it distribution of the heat. They were painted white, I believe. There's a picture of one that's white.
Yeah, the
docked
ones
in
that
there.
the ones that did not go to the moon. You look at Apollo 8. I think it had the tape on it, but I forget the other one. I don't know if Apollo 9 had tape on it or not, because it was just in lunar orbit. I mean, in Earth orbit. But they didn't need the tape until they went to the moon to keep it rotating. Did the barbecue
Right.
still? So
The tape, you mean, on
the
it, the
tape
silver.
on it, yeah, the silver tape underneath the blue tape that they pulled off right before launch.
Okay, but they're painted white
They're
up
painted
there
white,
for
yeah.
thermal protection, I suppose.
Yep.
But they performed great.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, it wasn't. I mean, you're part of that there. They were never initially designed to last almost 3 months in space.
They were, yeah, probably not, but then they were certified over the time. I'm sure before we did this missions, they had certified it that it would be fine for it to last that long in space.
Okay.
It was pretty robust. I mean, it really was. It's new technology back then, but the Apollo spacecraft was very robust. I would.
Of course, they shut it down and everything, and
Yeah.
when it was docked, it
Yeah.
didn't continuously operate.
Yeah.
So.
I don't know what the fuel cells would not have lasted that long, but they probably powered the fuel cells down too.
Mm-hmm. See if I have any questions on there. John Cipolla says, I would not want to be the guy sitting behind the 3 main astronauts up top there. And then Amy Collins, thank you for watching. Amy says, no window seats if you're going to get rescued. Looks very claustrophobic.
It is, and it's claustrophobic on the shuttle if you was on the mid deck for a reentry or launch, because you really didn't have a window to look out there either.
Yeah, I've always thought about that. The 2, 3, or some the 2 or 3 of them that with that mid deck, nothing to look out. That one window.
They had a window and a hatch, but it was behind them. And so I don't know if they could actually turn in their spacesuits with the helmets on, if they could turn around enough to look out that window.
Probably not. And hi, Cliff Watson in Pomona, Australia. Good Wednesday breakfast to you, my friend, down there. Well, there's a little bit of a controversy about the numbering system. Not a controversy, it's just 2 trains of thought. The engineers that were part of the launch of the Saturn V and the Saturn V directly in the firing room, here's your firing room badges to get in there from the Skylab 1, 2, 3, and 4. And you go, wait a minute, Skylab 1, 2, 3, and 4, what? Yeah, well, 1 was the Skylab orbital workshop to the engineering people in the launch control, and it dealt with the Saturn V rocket. And then 2 was the first crewed flight, but the media and your team of people and engineers went with, as you see, Roman numeral 1, upper right hand corner. You got the Skylab patch at the top, then Roman numeral 1, Skylab 1, Skylab 2, Roman numeral 2. And then part of the patch of the last mission is a 3 on there. So when you talk about Skylab 2 and 3, sometimes you have to ask, who's the commander?
If I was to go back to those days, my access badge that I had to have to get up to the vehicles for Skylab, it just said Skylab on it. And then my access badge for Skylab 1 had 1 on it, and 2 and 3 and so forth. So as far as all the engineering, that's the way it was. Only when you went into the firing room is you used their firing room access badges that had it numbered that way. Now, the ground rule I've always heard, there is no Apollo 2 and Apollo 3, even though we launched Apollo spacecraft on it, because it didn't have Apollo 2 and Apollo 3 did not have a Apollo spacecraft on it. They just were testing out the 3rd stage. Because it doesn't have a spacecraft on it, we could not name it Apollo 1, 2, 3, a number. So Skylab follows that same train of thought. Since there is actually no Apollo spacecraft on it, you cannot call it Apollo 1.
Okay.
Okay.
There you go. All right.
And so we know it as from the day it was conceived to the day it was in the ground, it was always Skylab.
The launch
Which makes sense.
of the Saturn V Skylab.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because there was no crew on it until we put it on with the Apollo 1 or Skylab 1.
Well, still occasionally in auctions, we have these up for sale. And so that's even why they're more cherished, because you walked into the firing room, you had to have these badges on there. And we've sold those for, I think we sold that lot for over $250.
Actually, you had 2 badges. You had the regular Skylab badge.
Yeah.
And then you would, for the firing room, you would have the Skylab 1 badge.
There you go. Permanent access there. One of the big shot engineers there own that. Well, we thought we'd enjoyed sharing that and confusing you with that as we're talking about Skylab today. There's that beautiful picture of Tom UCX sunrise over pad 39A. And let's see, we got Gary Gerald says he's got a question. Gary, what influences did Skylab have on the construction and development of the International Space Station?
There's such a tremendous amount of time distance between the two. I don't know if it had really any impact that I'm aware of, because we're just launch vehicles. I don't know of any reference back to Skylab. There's an old saying is if you worked on the Mercury and Gemini program and you went into a Apollo meeting and you said, this is how we did it in Mercury or Gemini, they would say, hey, we're not here. We're doing Apollo. We're not doing those missions. And that happened to me when I went into a meeting on the shuttle, and this is the way we did it in Apollo. I got my butt chewed out because that's not how we do it anymore. So you really don't look back at the past programs, at least when I was working out there.
And is that because how technology just keeps jumping ahead?
Well, it changes, the procedures, things change, the management style changes, everything changes when you go from the Apollo to the shuttle. It's all completely all different. It's all new, and we carried over very, very little from the Apollo program into the shuttle program.
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks for that good question there, Gary. I can't think of things outside of the basic, probably things like food haven't changed a whole lot, I mean, you still have to, keep healthy hygiene and things like that. Yeah. But these were the pioneers 50 years ago of what's going on. And if you know somebody who's 22 years old, whether it be a niece, a nephew, a granddaughter, a grandson, maybe your own kids, 22 years old, they've never breathed a breath that human beings weren't breathing, breaths orbiting the Earth.
That's right.
And that's an interesting thing to think of. Gary, always great having you here. One of your friends, Steve Miller, commented
Oh,
on a
really?
preview that he said Gary's a very informative person and he's a damn fast dirt bike
Ah,
racer.
thank you, Steve. Yeah, yeah, that's true. I'll have to admit to that. Yeah.
You like your dirt bikes,
Oh,
huh?
I love my dirt bikes. That was my relief.
Yeah. What
Uh,
kind did you have?
I've had so many dirt bikes. I got a new one every year to race, and so I've had
Did
started
you?
out. I started out with Yamahas, then went to KTM's, Pentons, Suzuki's, Yamaha.
I don't think you met
Husqvarna.
Dan McCune.
Oh yeah, I
You
know
know
Dan.
Dan.
Oh
Okay.
yeah, we're in the same club
Yeah.
together.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dan's. He's.
Oh yeah, he's good. Yeah, we enjoyed
Yeah. Yeah.
riding with
Dan
him.
did the spikes on the ice type of crazy
Yeah,
racing up
yeah.
in
He
the
was
cold weather.
Yeah, he was talking some stories about that. That's amazing to see those guys go flat tracking on that ice doing 50, 60 mile an hour, just laying it over, not even worrying about the bike sliding out from under them.
That's something else.
Yeah.
You dirt bike riding. Well,
Yeah.
Steve Miller, thank you for.
Yeah, Steve's still racing. I wish I could do that, but I
Well,
can't.
thanks for tuning us into that little habit of Gary's there. Gary, anything to think about that we should look back 50 years later and tribute or remember about Skylab?
Well, Skylab, even though it was not being occupied, it did have an important function to the United States. Is that while it was up in orbit, and they kept it up there as long as they could really keep it up there, not just because they wanted to have the space shuttle to rendezvous with it and boost it up to a higher and reuse it, but it was used also for calibrating all of our land based radars that looked into space.
Is that right?
They needed a large object up there, and so they knew where it was every day, so they would calibrate their radars with that.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
Before that, they would use Echo, the big balloon satellite that they
Yes,
put up
uh-huh.
there. That was what they also used back in the earlier days.
I don't remember ever seeing Skylab go overhead like I've seen the International Space Station probably hundreds of times now. It was hard to find information to when you could figure out when it was going to come over.
We didn't have cell phones.
No,
back
yeah,
then
I
either,
didn't have
so you
hardly-
didn't have all the data.
Cell phones, heck, everything was landlines.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're lucky to have two phones in your house at
Yeah.
the time. But absolutely, I just point that out. How half a century later, I have an app everybody does on their phone where we can go out and look at the space station going over. I saw the Chinese Tiangong space station going over the other night, very north in front of Polaris. Amy Collins adds Skylab provided the baseline for long duration medical data for long duration flight. Even the Soviets referred to it during the Salyut era, which it took the Salyut era to break the 84-day record up there. Thank you, Amy, for chiming in there.
There's some interesting videos if you've ever seen them where the three astronauts started on a crawl and they would run around the circle, and as they faster they went, the more they could stand up to where it just like running on Earth.
Huh.
And there's a video of that. They did have a jetpack
Yes.
that they could fly around in
Jack
there.
Lausma flew the first man maneuvering unit inside. It had, I asked him what kind of, it had, the thrusters were gas that was being expelled. It wasn't
They also
tetrahydrogen.
used big wheels, spinning wheels, gyroscopes to keep them in its proper orientation. They spun those up and they would use that. I think they had 3-axis gyros in there.
That's cool. When you're done watching this program on YouTube, put in a Skylab video or two there.
Yeah.
They did a lot of fun experiments up there. Had a big time because it was a big place, and they could do things that we couldn't even do in the International Space Station with confined space there.
One other interesting story. Right before we launched Skylab, at the very top, we had a thing called, on Apollo, we had a call a cue ball,
Yes.
which gave them the angle of attack and make sure that they're on the right projectile as they're going up. Well, I had one on there and it had a cover over it to protect it from the weather. Well, before launch, they had to get that off. And what they did, asked for volunteers, and a volunteer, I would have volunteered, but it was too late. They put you in a harness, they tied you to that big crane up overhead, and they suspend you over the over this lab, and he had to pull that off manually by hand and bring it back in. That
My.
was a very popular request that people really wanted to do.
The cue ball.
Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
need to do a show on the cue ball one time.
Well, there's not a whole lot to it, but yeah, he can do that.
I've actually seen one.
Yeah.
They have one at the Sands.
Sands, okay.
I believe they have one for
Yeah.
another missile or something. Same
Yep.
concept.
For the Saturn V launches, Apollo launches, they had a lanyard tied to the overhead crane, and as it got the T0, the crane would swing around and it pulled it off.
Yeah.
I had a video of it. And I tried to capture it on my on a screenshot, but I never could catch it just as it was coming off.
Well, great trivia. People love the space program even a half a decade later. We appreciate you all for watching today and chiming in with your messages. Marty, great job today on doing the Streamlabs there. And anything you want to add?
Nope.
Nope. All right, good. We're looking for a guest tomorrow that I need to confirm, but Terry White's on Thursday. And Friday we were going to talk about the Starliner launch, but that's been pushed back to
again.
May 21st, Tuesday at 4:43 in the afternoon. So we'll come up with always something interesting to help you stay curious. So, Gary, thanks a lot
Thank you.
for coming in,
No,
and
it's fine.
knew you'd
Fun.
have some jewels to share with us and our Stay Curious audience here as you were there and lived it, my friend, just like Marty Winkle, my co-producer here, lived it. So until tomorrow, when we'll crank it up again and help you all stay curious, I'm Mark Marquette saying I can't wait to see you in our museum to get a tour from Gary and bridge the space between us. See y'all again.